member, and he shall be presenting or representing.
Thank you so much. Can I share my... Yes, can you see? It's very early morning. Today, in this presentation, I will provide a comparative analysis. I investigated national museums as instruments for constructing national memory in the institution of National Museum, examining museums' function as a repositories of national museums, first the Indian National Museum, then National Museum of Pakistan, and finally Bangladesh National Museum. In conclusion, I will present a comparative analysis of this musealization of partition and its memories within the National Museum's representation. So, let's first come to the national memory. The relationship between nation and memory is both complex and very deeply entangled. Nations construct and employ a collective memory to shape the national public, while individuals internalize and engage with this memory to become part of the national community, what is known as imagined community, which allows them to imagine that the nation as a community. From this perspective, national memory connects citizens and plays a crucial role in fostering their loyalty to the nation. Perhaps we can borrow a few sentences from psychologist and memory scholar James Birch. He writes, given the massive resources and power that modern states devote to promulgating official accounts of their past, national memory presents a special case in this regard. These efforts as promulgation presents the largest and most sustained collective memory projects in history. So now, where to find the national memory? These are the sources where we can find the national memory. These are the textbooks, national calendars, national holidays, national monuments, bank notes, name of the national institutions, and of course the national museums. So, how the National Museum connects with the national memory. National museums play a complex role in constructing, staging, and framing national memory. They are central components of their state nations building project, and as a publicly funded mnemonic institutions, they are subjected to substantial state influences. Peter Aronson underscores this museum as the cultural constitution of the nation. These museums aims to write the autobiography of the nation, and in this process they play a crucial role in articulating national memories for the public. The construction of national memory is a continuous process of reconstruction that always focused on presentism, present political and social demands. As repositories of the national past, national museums are keen to showcase the pivotal moments of the nations. For any country, independence is the most significant event for the nation building. Therefore, museums predominantly focuses on independence as the dominant event in their representations. By making independence the dominant event in the national narrative, national museums reflexively render other events as non-dominant. So in this framework, we will try to see how these three countries' national museums represent the partition. So, interestingly, in South Asia, all these three national museums has a deep connection with their colonial past, and some of these few two or three of these two museums became national museum because of accidents and rivalries between different countries. But this is not our discussion today, but if you are interested, we can take it to the question and answer session. So let's first look at the Indian National Museum. The British government planned to establish this National Museum in Delhi when they relocated the capital in Delhi in 1911. They selected the center of the British administration, the Central Vista, as the place for the planned National Museum. However, this museum was not established during the British period. After independence, the Indian government implemented to colonial plan to establish the country's National Museum. Initially, it started its journey at the President's House, and in 1960, the museum shifted to its present house. Today, the museum holds more than 200,000 objects and exhibits artifacts spanning last 5,000 years, not only from present-day India, but also from the border geographic region, including what are now Pakistan and Bangladesh. The Indian National Museum does not display any objects or narratives related to the country's independence movement or the leaders who led it, the end of the colonial rule, and partitioning of the land and the violent aftermath remain. That all these are totally absent in the India's National Museum's exhibition. So, but how and why this absent happened, I will come back to it later. So, now our second National Museum is the Pakistan National Museum. This museum was inaugurated in April 1950, just few months after India opens its National Museum to the public. Previously, this museum was housed in Karachi's colonial era town hall building, known as the Friar Hall, the provincial capital of Sindh. This Karachi was very severely affected by the partition. This museum has 10 galleries. The first 4 galleries of the museum highlights the antiquity of Pakistan land. It displays the Indus Valley antiques or the relics, and then the Gandhara art and so on. While 4 other galleries are intended to illustrate the distinct Muslim historic tradition of Pakistan. The 8th gallery, the ethnological gallery, showcases the cultural diversity of people living in Pakistan. And the 7th gallery, that is the Freedom Movement Gallery, focuses on the formation of state Pakistan, independence, and partition. So these are the 2 pictures I took from the Pakistan National Gallery. So here it's all about the Jinnah, it's all about the Iqbal and their pictures, their family photographs, and the different leaders who lead the freedom movement of Pakistan. So, and it's in a very disjunctioned manner. The narrative of this gallery does not convey the narrative of independence. It's just random pictures are there. And there, in this museum, it represents or exhibits only 4 paintings that reflects the human suffering of the partition. One of these paintings is here, and I did not show you today, but we can show it later if necessary. But these pictures are not also conveying any message why these people are moving forward, these burning houses and landscape and so on. But it's just 4 paintings are there. In that sense, we can say that in Pakistan's museum's narrative, it's mostly about the leaders who were in charge of the independence, and the human suffering is there, but why the people suffer and how the people suffer, this is completely absent in the museum's narrative. And then the museum includes independence and the Islamic identity of Pakistan as an integral part of national memory, but the narrative of independence is exhibited in a very fragmented manner that I wanted to say here. And then we are, are going to Bangladesh National Museum. This museum was initially started as Dhaka Museum in 1913 by the British, and in 1983 the Bangladesh government transformed this colonial era museum into country's national museum. This museum today comprises 44 galleries. Most of the galleries are focusing on to constructing the national border and the antiquity of this region, what is now Bangladesh. In the musealization of Bangladesh as a nation state, the Liberation War of 1971 stands as the most significant event showcased at the National Museum. Just I want to include that my field work in this museum I did in December 2022, but I think now the museum narrative also got a little changed, so excuse me for my field work. It happened 2 years back, not right, just a few days ago. So in this Bangladesh struggle for independence, Bengali, Bangladesh, and War of Liberation, 1, 2, 3. There are 3 galleries that mainly narrates the independence of Bangladesh. And in the first gallery highlights several historical events presented as fundamental moment in the history of Bangladesh. It mostly shows the War of Palashi and the formation of Muslim League and so on. And in this gallery, this picture is the only part that displays the partition of India, or the partition. Here it's only just few press photographs that shows that the Gandhi's visit to Noakhali and Jinnah Gandhi talks and so on. It's also very disjointed manner, and it doesn't reflect or narrate why partition happened, how people suffer, and human suffering of from this event is completely absent in the Bangladesh Museum's narrative of partition. So in the museum representation of Bangladesh, it's all about the 1971. Apart from few photos, and museum does not narrate the event at all. And it briefly, in this brief display, roams around the partition. The narrative roams around the partition, but it does not address the event and its eventualities. So, to conclude how these three national museums display the partition, in the Indian National Museum, the musealized framework of India centers around the antiquity of the lands. Of course, India was there for 1,000 years, but the partition or the independence gave a new map and present the modern status of India. But in the musealization, it's all about the notion of India rather than the present day nation India. In Pakistan, the independence and the country's independence is there, the Muslim identity is very highlighted there, but the human suffering of the partition is more or less absent, or it just there as a part of the state-nation building project. And of course, the Karachi, the city where the museum is situated, it was highly suffered from the event partition, but it does not say anything about the millions of refugees story into the city also. In Bangladesh, the 71 shaped the 47 as a distant event, and it made the partition, in a sense, quite unessential in the nation building or the national memory of Bangladesh. This was my brief line, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Aniruddha, providing a glimpse into the three museums reflecting their natural history. I will now open the floor to questions. You can ask straight from the author. Thank you. Please.
Thank you, Aniruddha. So that's a nice study that you were conducting. So my question is, as your paper says that so it's kind of these national museums are reflecting the mainstream history of each country, which I could get from your discussion. Now, besides this national museum, are you also looking at those dedicated partition museums like in Amritsar or Kolkata, or even the digital museum that Kolkata started the project, but it is half finished? I mean, is it possible that these three states can also go for a digital museum? As a few moments ago, our younger students were saying that they don't feel the affective part of partition. It could also, I think, that could significantly work out for the younger generation. What's your take on that?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your comment. Yes, last couple of years I was studying two different types of museums in the subcontinent, National Museum and the memorial museums in India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, how these museums narrate or represent the event partition and its eventualities. So today I'm just talking about the national museums, but I have a different chapter for the memorial museums and digital archives and digitization processes, also oral histories and so on. But yes, in that sense, how far we can take the digital museum or the project Kolkata digital museum, it's still under process, it's still under construction. In that sense, of course, there are some interesting examples of the digital museum or the virtual museum in that sense, but I can't give you that much input about that museum because it's still under process. Sometimes it's browsable, sometimes it's not browsable in that sense. So I don't have enough to say you today, but of course the narrative of National Museum and the Memorial Museum is quite different. The National Museum reflects the state narrative of the partition in a sense, and Memorial Museums is it's also funded by the NGOs or the community initiatives that talks about the people's suffering or the people's history of, in a sense, people's history. How far people's history, that is another debate also. So, but their point of focal point is completely different. One is state's reflection of partition, another one is community's reflection of partition. That is my input today. Yes. Thanks.
So much.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Anybody?
You can go first. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the paper, Professor Aniruddha. I was actually curious about this question Ishrat asked, what the impacts of museums and memorials can be on the youth of the present generation. And I was presenting a paper on the national museums and monuments in Bangladesh last year while this, student uprising was happening simultaneously. And I found that even after, building up all these national monuments and museums, the learning of history is a completely different trajectory, and the museums, their impact, this needs to be analyzed vis-a-vis the created artifacts. I visited all of these museums and I found that some of the artifacts are not real, in the sense that it is some kind of politicized remembrance. Remembrance is obviously a politicized act. So what about those artifacts in those museums that you talked about, the partition museums and memorials that you visited and the artifacts that were in display? Do you think they had enough truth in this post-truth time for the young generations?
Yes, thank you so much for your question. And here it comes few points that is quite interesting, that how we situate museums in the South Asian aspect or South Asian local setting. But if we compare museums in the Western setting and the museum in non-West, global non-West, and museums in our subcontinent, that is quite different. And museums in our country, Bangladesh or India, Pakistan, these are treated very poorly in a sense. And it's not a popular destination for people to go in a weekend or for leisure activities in that sense also. And curatorial practices in Bangladesh or India, Pakistan is not that much professionally done, or they don't treat museum in a very sensitive manner also. This is the one side of the museums in our subcontinent. And then comes to the point that is very interesting and debatable also, the truth. And of course, what is truth and what is not truth is not my focus of my research also, because there are many truths. It's a plural idea nowadays. And museums also can narrate. Museums is also came up with many narratives. It's not only a singular narrative in that sense, but in our practice, musealization practice, it's come, as I said also, as a dominant narrative, and others stays as non-dominant narrative. But it could be many multiple narratives also, not dominant and non-dominant. We can come out from this binary also, but in our musealization practice, it's somehow not practiced, or historically it was never been practiced. So I cannot say you what is truth, what is not truth, because it's not part of my core idea here, for my core research also. I just told you my experiences of visiting different museums and how I see their representations. Of course, it's multifolded and multifolded truths are there, but which fold you are showing, that is my point mostly. Which part you are putting under the carpet or putting beside the curtain, that I don't know, that I'm not going to that direction that much. Although in my dissertation or in my research, I talked about this, how museums made some part of the history silent or invisible. But for today, this national museums discussion, I want to focus. I don't want to go to what is truth, what is non-truth. That will take us to a different direction. Thank you.
Aniruddha Motushi here. Thank you so much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. I remember when we met, I met Aniruddha when his lovely wife was here, Shrutika, in Heidelberg. And I remember right after I left Heidelberg, you said, I'm going to Pakistan, wish me luck. I'm going to all these museums. And I really wanted to know, like, what kind of conversations would you have in places, interesting museums across South Asia with the curators? would there be curators, and what kind of interesting, if so, hopefully productive conversations would you have with curators when you tell them that you're working on this research, for instance? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for listening me today also, of course. And this is also very interesting how the curators or how the museum directors or how the museum personnel act or react with the researchers in it. It's also multifolded. And in a sense, like my conversations with the memorial museums curator is very different than the national museums curators. National museums curators they are not that much trained to talk to researchers. They don't like to talk to the researchers. If you go to the Bangladesh National Museum or Pakistan National Museum with a very simple query like how this object came to you musealized, they will they will reply you, please come tomorrow, and it will take many tomorrows to get reply from them. So in that sense also, like when I was talking to Bangladesh National Museum curators and regarding the research about partition, they asked me that why you need to research on partition, why we need to musealize partition. In our state nation building project, the museum doesn't, the partition does not affect that much. But it took me a long time to convince them that why I'm studying partition. They asked me to study some other event, but this is how they react. Or in India, let's say Indian National Museum, the curator asked me that we really don't need to represent partition because it's a very dark past. We need to look forward. If we focus on partition, then we cannot move forward. So this is how the professional people of this subcontinent they deal the partition. But of course, if I remember my conversation with the Amritsar Partition Museum, that goes another direction. They handle this event more sensitive way or more human manner in that sense. So and also in a sense the Pakistan they see the partition very differently from the Bangladesh point of view, and India sees this is very different perspective, and in all of these are very much reflected in my conversations with them. But also I found that talking to the curators is not that much helpful, because when you're studying museum, it is there, the display is there, but when you are talking to them about the partition, they misguide you also in some senses. So talking to the curators was not that much helpful for me, in a sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Aniruddha.
Thank you, Aniruddha. We have to come to the end of the session. And some very important points pointed out. One, museums being state institutions, so therefore it will try to preserve state memories as well as to project what is considered the state ideology. I think the other part is that museums are not necessarily efficient. And it depends a lot on how much resources it has, how much artifacts it can collect, and that depends on national budgets and the priorities. And to expect multiple stories being told in museums is absurd. Gone all over the world, and I haven't seen a museum which satisfies everyone, which Aniruddha very put well. But the new phenomena that we need to look at is the digital museum. For example, the amount of materials that are actually on the net, which would qualify as representations in museums, are enormous. And families, societies, and the state are three different realities. So they have three different memories of the same event. And I personally have benefited a lot from the digital memories because my family spread over 3-4 countries. And they all are setting up these family groups. And I think one of the more pleasant museum thing was to find the family groups from Shillong sending a digital image of my parents' wedding invitation, which I have never seen in my life. It was 1945. So you can see how much is actually preserved in family archives. And I have a picture of my mother when she was 5 years old. I didn't really. I mean, I had no idea it was there. But I think we should focus a lot more on the new capacity people have now of setting up the digital archives. And these digital archives bring together people better rather than waiting for the state to decide what you should see. You can see what it exists. And class is an issue in museums as well. When I was working in the history project, we knew that class was going to be, you remember by class, you do not remember. A girl was doing her PhD under me, she's from Jadavpur, and she was doing on ephemera. Ephemera are transient memoriologics, and she found that ephemera itself is also influenced. So she was making a comparison between Irish ephemera and Bangladesh ephemera, and how they differ. So you can see that the social space is expanding and the status space is decreasing, and people's satisfaction with the status space is less. So the social space, particularly with social media, is now expanding. So thank you, Aniruddha, triggered off a lot